Good morning, I'm Craig Negrelli. It's Thursday, April 17th, 2025, and these are your Unbiased Updates. A new back and forth between the courts and the Trump administration over the man mistakenly deported to El Salvador. The clear statement by the Attorney General on if he's coming back, and what a judge might do if the Trump administration does not follow his orders. And more federal funding cuts possible for Harvard University as its president refuses to make changes to its policies as demanded by the Trump administration.
From the Straight Arrow News Studio, bringing the stories that matter to you from across the United States and around the world, these are today's Unbiased Updates.
The Trump administration has released new documents in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the Maryland man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador a month ago. The documents made public Wednesday after weeks of pressure on the government to prove Abrego Garcia was formerly a member of the MS-13 gang. The Justice Department records detail how police officers in Maryland assessed Abrego Garcia was a member of the MS-13 gang during an arrest in 2019. The police report cites what investigators believe was gang symbolic clothing and a source who told investigators Garcia was an active member of MS-13. He had no criminal history at the time, which the documents also point out, and his attorneys have denied that he is a gang member. After his 2019 arrest, an immigration judge ordered he not be sent back to El Salvador for fear of gang retribution. Abrego Garcia was in the United States legally and still under that protected status when the Trump administration deported him by flying him to a prison in El Salvador. The Department of Justice has now filed notice that it will appeal an order from a federal judge saying the government must facilitate Abrego Garcia's return to the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi is adamant.
He is not coming back to our country. President Bukele said he was not sending him back. That's the end of the story. If he wanted to send him back, we would give him a plane ride back. There was no situation ever where he was going to stay in this country. None. He would have come back, had one extra step of paperwork, and gone back again. But he's from El Salvador, he's in El Salvador, and that's where the president plans on keeping him.
Meanwhile, another federal judge is warning he could prosecute some Trump administration officials for violating his orders to turn around planes carrying deportees to the El Salvador prison. Straight Arrow News reporter Lauren Keenan has details.
A federal judge rules he's found probable cause to hold the Trump administration in contempt for failing to comply with its court order when deporting alleged Venezuelan gang members to El Salvador last month. In March, President Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act, which grants the president powers to apprehend and deport naturalized individuals and remove them from the country. U.S. District Judge James Boasberg granted a temporary restraining order on Saturday, March 15th, ordering the government to halt the deportation flights and return the planes. However, the federal government argued flights that left that weekend were already over international waters when the judge made the ruling, so the deportees were not brought back to the United States. Nearly 300 migrants arrived in El Salvador that night and were sent to the High Security Terrorism Confinement Center, also known as CCOT. Last week, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Trump administration, allowing the federal government to use the Alien Enemies Act to deport alleged gang members to the mega prison in El Salvador. Justices ruled the deportees must be given notice so they can challenge their removal from the country. The court ultimately determines that the government's actions on that day demonstrate a willful disregard for its order, sufficient for the court to conclude that probable cause exists to find the government in criminal contempt, Judge Boasberg wrote in his 46-page order. Despite the court's written order and the oral command spelling out what was required for compliance, the government did not stop the ongoing removal process, he added. The Trump administration responding with White House Director of Communications Stephen Chung writing on X, "We plan to seek immediate appellate relief. The president is 100% committed to ensuring that terrorists and criminal illegal migrants are no longer a threat to Americans and their communities across the country." In his ruling, Judge Boasberg said he will provide the Trump administration with an opportunity to purge such contempt. So what happens next? First, the judge says the court will identify the individual or individuals responsible for the contumacious conduct by determining whose specific act or omission caused the noncompliance. Second, if the court will require written declarations from these individuals, and if the court finds them to be unsatisfactory, the court will proceed with live witness testimony under oath. Then the court would then request that if an individual were found to be in contempt, he or she is prosecuted by a government attorney. And finally, if the government declines to prosecute, the court can appoint another attorney to prosecute the individual found in contempt.
That was our Lauren Keenan reporting. Judge Boasberg did not say which official or officials could be held in contempt. He is giving the government until next Wednesday to avoid a contempt charge, if it provides an explanation of their actions and comes into compliance with the original order issued last month. The Trump administration is now threatening to ban Harvard University from enrolling international students, which account for more than a quarter of Harvard students this year, according to the BBC. The Department of Homeland Security says if the Ivy League university does not meet demands to share information on some visa holders, the school will also lose 2 DHS grants, totaling nearly $3 million. The federal government already froze more than $2 billion in funding for Harvard earlier this week after Harvard's president refused to consent to the government's demands for changes to hiring, admissions, and teaching practices, which the Trump administration claims will help fight anti-Semitism on campus. Since then, the government has also threatened to strip Harvard of its tax-exempt status. The U.S. Army has delivered more than 50 armored Stryker fighting vehicles to Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas. It comes after President Trump authorized the military to take control of a 700-mile-long and 60-foot-deep strip of federal land along the U.S.-Mexico border, stretching from California to New Mexico. The vehicles do not have weapons systems. Rather, they're equipped with thermal and infrared cameras, so soldiers can watch for movements along the southern border. The establishment of a so-called buffer zone means the land within those zones is considered a national defense area. As a result, soldiers can detain anyone who sets foot in the area, just as they would a trespasser on a military base. Earlier this week, U.S. Customs and Border Protection came out with numbers for March. Agents apprehended 7,181 migrants at the southern border, a 95% decrease from March of 2024. The head of the Federal Reserve says President Trump's unprecedented tariffs on more than 150 countries around the world are likely to have major impacts on U.S. consumers and the economy. Jerome Powell made the remarks during an event hosted by the Economic Club of Chicago on Wednesday.
The level of tariff increases announced so far is significantly larger than anticipated, and the same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth. Tariffs are highly likely to generate at least a temporary rise in inflation. The inflationary effects could also be more persistent.
Already popular China-founded e-commerce sites Temu and Shein say they plan to raise prices for American customers starting next week as China faces the highest tariffs of any country under the Trump administration policy. Neither company gave specific details on how much. The 145% tariff President Trump slapped on most products made in China, as well as his decision to end a customs exemption that allows goods worth less than $800 to come into the U.S. duty-free, has impacted Shein and Temu's business models. As many as 4 million low-value parcels, most of them originating in China, arrive in the U.S. every day under the soon-to-be-canceled provision. Also Wednesday, President Trump went on his Truth Social platform to say he met with the Japanese delegation on trade at the White House, and there was big progress. Puerto Rico is dealing with another power blackout, this time as tourists flock there for Holy Week and Easter weekend. Hotels are at capacity. A spokesman for the energy company Luma says 1.5 million customers were left in the dark initially, with crews restoring just more than 10% of electricity by Wednesday night. Now there is outrage directed at the power company, with Governor Jennifer Gonzalez saying it is unacceptable to have a failure of this magnitude. She vowed to cancel the government contract with Luma, but said it will take time to find a replacement. Dozens of people were forced to walk on the overpass near the rapid transit system in the capital of San Juan. Traffic came to a standstill as lights were out. Puerto Rico has been marred by power outages since September of 2017, when Hurricane Maria battered the island. The Puerto Rican representative in Congress, Pablo Jose Hernandez, says after years of blackouts, the power grid is going from bad to worse. Finally this morning, an attempt to revive the Fyre Festival appears to be on hold. Event organizer Billy McFarland says Fyre Festival 2, which was scheduled for May 30th through June 2nd, will no longer take place in the Mexican resort town of Playa del Carmen. This comes after the event's website momentarily announced it had been postponed, sparking confusion among ticket holders. McFarland told NBC News the festival dates are dependent on location. However, organizers say the event will go on, and unlike the first Fyre Festival in 2017, it will be a, quote, electrifying celebration of music, arts, cuisine, comedy, fashion, gaming, sports, and treasure hunting. McFarland was convicted of wire fraud in connection with the failed 2017 highly publicized event and served time in prison. Tickets for Fyre Festival 2 range in price from $1,400 to $1.1 million. And fortunately, the company in charge of ticket sales for the event says anyone who has already bought a ticket is eligible for a full refund in light of this new development. So I guess all sales are not final. Those are your unbiased updates for this Thursday. We'll see you back here tomorrow. For all of us here at Straight Arrow News, I'm Craig DeGrelli. Have a great day.